And now it's time for a fireside chat called From Abuja to Porto. To moderate this session, please welcome Mr. Tomas Lamanauskas, Deputy Secretary General of the ITU. A round of applause, please. And once again, Sandra, please welcome His Excellency Minister Bosun Tijani, Minister of Communication, Innovation and Digital Economy from Nigeria. And now, once again, Sandra Maximiano, Chairwoman of ANACOM's Board of Directors and Co-Chair of the International Advisory Board for Submarine Cable Resilience. A good chat.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. So indeed, thank you very much, Sandra and ANACOM, for inviting us here in Porto. As I understood from Ambassador Gomez's speech, it's the place of submarine cables and wine. And both are very important of connecting people. So I think we'll definitely have, enough of both of them, in here while I will stay. And thank you very much for this great hospitality of our hosts here today. And again, as Ambassador Gomez mentioned, we have had quite a journey between Abuja and Porto. And actually before Abuja already, so an international advisory body on submarine cable resilience was launched in November 2024. And I have to credit Minister Tijani for initiating that, and then coming to ITU and saying, okay, what are we doing about enhancing submarine cable resilience, especially after some specific incidents, including in West Africa, but elsewhere, saying, look, we really need to pay more attention to that. And of course, thank you very much, Sandra, for joining that work. And as you know, today is also not just a Porto Summit, but also was the second physical meeting of International Advisory Body on Submarine Cable Resilience. So that is composed of 40 experts, led plus 2 chairs, led by, indeed, Minister Tijani and Professor Maximiano. But also, it's not only that, it's also more than 150 experts in the working groups that were set up in Abuja, and those working groups are delivering very concrete recommendations on how to develop submarine cable resilience. And again, big thanks for those colleagues in those working groups, big thanks for co-facilitators of those working groups as well, working in a super collaborative way to develop recommendations. And I have to already say, we had a very successful morning this morning where we endorsed, the advisory body fully endorsed recommendations, as well as endorse the declaration that Professor Maximiano already announced, and you can find it online as well. So we know that we are off to a successful result. But now I think it's a good time to start this with reflection, where we're coming from, where we're now, what's left, So I think that's what I'll try to start, and we'll start with you, Minister Tijani. So, when you look back from Abuja and that road from Abuja to Porto, where have we come now, So can you describe that results we're achieving? And, already please do your evaluation. Are you happy with where we are?
That simple answer, DSG, is yes. I think extremely happy. But let me start, of course, by appreciating Professor Maximiano. Manuel is somewhere in the room as well, and the team at ANACOM for hosting us. You've been a gracious host. We've had a few hours here. But I think to speak to the question, Thomas, I'd like to start by highlighting, because I think this is something that is worth learning from, the extremely unique leadership that ITU brought to the table when we had this conversation. I think DSG and DSG thought this is something that we absolutely must amplify and work on extensively. But you didn't just back it with leadership. You also then put together a strong team internally that has been supporting this work to ensure that we can actually drive progress. But I think the biggest masterstroke for me was the inclusion of ICPC in this work, the technical expertise and focus that they brought to the table. So that's been the progress I've seen. But you didn't stop there. Abuja in itself was more about mobilizing political backing for the work, ensuring that we can get countries all over the world to show that this is something we should definitely work on. Then the working group, the level of technical expertise we've seen from diverse background and walks of life all over the country, I think became a source of reassurance that this important topic is in the hands of the right people. I think what we've seen as recommendation from the working group is them begging for extra leadership, which is saying, what do we do to take those recommendations and turn them into actions? Because at the end of the day, as a minister where I sit, and when we go all over the world and we engage, we daily invest in come up with policies that is dragging every aspect of our lives into the digital space. And if digital economy is becoming the foundation for everything we do, and digital infrastructure as such is becoming that critical asset that we must protect, we also then have the responsibility to ensure their uptime. If we're not going to ignore airspaces, borders, roads, because they're extremely important, there's absolutely no way in the world where we should ignore this particular topic as well.
Thank you very much. And Sandra, what's your reflection? Where we are now, what we have achieved?
So I think Abuja was extremely important because it was really fundamental to secure endorsement of membership of the advisory body. But now we are in a different stage because now we see this really consolidation of an amazing work and technical work. And now, as everyone is hoping, the implementation of the recommendations. So I think we are at a turning point. It's very critical for the industry that are really expecting these practical, implementable recommendations on different aspects like permitting, repairing, financing of submarine cables. So it's really important, all this path that we actually did together. And I can't stop to emphasize the amazing work that everyone had, the working group especially, that I really follow very closely. And for me, let me share you this, like, I'm an academic, so in academia we work in groups and we do co-authoring work and usually not like with more than 100 experts working together. And this was fantastic. And it was really hard to get that set. And I really want to acknowledge the extreme effort, dedication, the long hours, long meetings, long hours of negotiations. So for reaching where we are now, so we are really at a point where we consolidated technical work. And now I think there is these big expectations of everyone on how we are going to move forward and how we are going to implement these recommendations. So I think this collaborative effort means really something, as I have been saying this the entire day, and I'll keep saying this until the end of the summit and moving forward with this idea, that it fully justifies the creation of the advisory body. So we see this, that we can make a difference. We can make a difference to regions, countries, small state islands, where the lack of real economic incentives can make it much more difficult to solve some critical situations in terms of maintenance, repair, when it is needed. So now we are, as we mentioned here, in this stage of consolidation, this technical work, and we will move forward to that.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Now, going deeper on the recommendations themselves and role of stakeholders, so Minister, in terms of as a government leader, so and when you look at the recommendations coming from our advisory body, what's your reflection on the role of the government in strengthening cable resilience? What you will take from recommendations, how that relates to the experience as the government? What will be different? What you will be doing differently after that, after reading those recommendations, reflecting on them?
I think what led me here in the first place is looking for meaning and trying to understand what we should be doing as government. And I think the outcomes of the different working group has been, you can say it's been extremely instructive as to what we should be doing. When we had a cable cut in the region in West Africa in 2024, I was surprised at the total lack of coordination between the private sector and government. And even when I spoke to the regulator, there wasn't any clear protocol of what we should be doing. All that was known was the private companies who own these cables are already trying to find a path forward, which for me felt a bit irresponsible. If we are looking at something that has significant implication for society. I don't think it's something you only leave in the hands of private companies. Then he also came to Africa, when to Africa was landing in Nigeria in 2 different locations. I saw the companies behind this cable moving from one government office to the other, trying to secure the right permits to land the cable. Again, that felt like that shouldn't be the kind of environment we should still have in 2025, 2026. So what I'm seeing here, and before this, those 2 things actually led Nigeria to the declaration of digital infrastructure as CNI. So we're one of the few countries on the African continent that is now chosen to classify digital infrastructure as critical national infrastructure. But what I'm seeing here is also the clarity around what we should be doing. So for instance, in my mind, it's very clear that the West African region should have a clear agreed protocol for redundancy management, because independently, most countries will struggle to do anything when we're in this case. We're at the mercy of some companies and ships that have to come all the way from South Africa. We've seen the need also for innovative financing in terms of even how we do surveillance of the parts where these cables are laid, so we can reduce the cost. There's opportunity around innovative financing also in terms of how we respond, helping the companies who own this cable to make it a lot easier. How do we coordinate as well? These cables are not just cables that appear from Portugal and land in a single country. They pass through multiple territories, and those territories have jurisdictions and laws. I think it's very clear what we need to do. I think there are unspoken things as well, like even talent, that we have enough talent in the region to even do basic management as well. So for me, it's clear that the working groups have given us the nudge and the push and the direction that we should be taking. Is how we then take this work back home to turn it into practical steps. One of the things we're now doing is to ensure that there's a dedicated desk at NCC, which is our communications regulator, that is responsible for subsea cables, so there's clarity. And the goal will be to back them with budget to get them to continue to focus on this topic and ensure that government is always ready to support, but also that we're being proactive as well, not just reacting to changes that we may see along the line.
Thank you very much, Minister. It really seems that we have some very tangible directions that we can take, and as well as I think what we are starting to talk more and more, not only global, but also regional or sub-regional approach that hopefully this work is inspiring. Now, Sandra, going to you also as a government representative, but also more specifically as a regulator. So what you're learning from that work and about your role as a regulator, what could be useful for you, but also broader for the broader government role. What will it change for you?
So let me start by the end, like the government role, which I think is extremely important here. So we need actually to guarantee like a balance between innovation, security, investment. So I think governments have here a very important role in that. As it was mentioned here, like in some situations, in some countries, in some projects, we need this public financing. There is no way that that cannot be done. And we have a good example of that in Portugal. The CAM ring is a really good example. It's a strategical critical for our country, for transatlantic connectivity. And it was very difficult to serve if there was not this public financing, but that comes also with some extra responsibilities, and we have to be sure that incorporate resilience into that as well in a very proactive way. So I think that's a very important point that we need to take. And also, another point that especially from working group number 3, so it has to do with fostering connectivity and geographic diversity. I think we can learn that these recommendations are not only important for developing countries, but also for peripheral regions, even within European Union context. And within the European Union context, for instance, like initiatives such as Global Gateway, they align very closely to these recommendations, particularly when we are addressing to situations where we need, where the upfront investment is really high. So we need to have that into account. So now as a regulator, more specifically, I think especially working group 1, timely deployment and repair, and working group 2, risk identification, monitoring and mitigation, they align very strongly with the experience of an independent regulator. I think for effective regulation, we need for sure to be based, our decisions need to be based on evidence, and not so much driven by critical response or political pressure. So this is, I think, an important message that I want to send. And another thing is we are really dealing with infrastructure that has a long lifetime. So the life cycle of a submarine cable is 25, 30 years. So this requires much more regulatory certainty. So we need somehow to support this investment. We need proportionality in regulatory obligations, and we also have that into account. This is really, as I mentioned, a really key challenge, which is balance innovation, balance resilience, balance competition. And as a regulator, and specifically like ANACOM, we have all that always in mind. So we always have to focus on fostering competition, improve security, improve, of course, as well this international coordination, and sustain investment. So there are all points that are extremely important. And also, we have been deepening our partnerships across these years and recognizing the role of each player here. So governments, regulators, extremely important to set the proper framework, the regulatory and policy framework, but academia to foster innovation and research, but also, of course, industry, that it's so important to build and operate and maintain this critical infrastructure. So we recognize the role of every stakeholder, and I think the work of all these working groups that really resonate so much within our work as regulators and independent regulators.
So thank you very much. And this is indeed important aspects from the national perspective. And moving both, and I think, Minister, you also started to talk about the regional, sub-regional collaboration, but I would ask also the broader international. So, from this insight, of course, we can always, the word international means we need to collaborate, but let's be more specific. Why do we need to collaborate on submarine cable resilience? What are these aspects of collaboration that really make the difference, and how this relates to the work of this advisory body? How do you see that collaboration now? How do you see that evolving?
I think it's clear that everyone in the room will recognize that subsea cable by nature is international. No one can deny that. So we can see it as global infrastructure that we all share. It belongs to the global community. That's the reality. I think there are only a few cases where any nation can say this is an asset that belongs to just us. And as much as sovereignty is a big conversation around these things, we all know that it also leads to isolation. We've just watched the video from the EU representative that spoke about a collective approach within the region. I think it's not all regions where you have that opportunity and the platform to bring everyone together to get it done. But it's clear that it's something that we all have to work on together. While nations may be responsible for landing point, I still think there's the big gap and opportunity in the role of international organizations like ITU and ICPC to actually help determine the norms that we should all leverage to create the path for effective management in our regions, to help also drive that collaboration. I think the question for me has always been, before this body, the only thing that existed, I think, was ICPC, and I didn't know about ICPC as a minister. That's just the fact. And There's no world where we think the work is done because the advisory board is proposed a recommendation. That would be us assuming that the threat to this critical infrastructure is something that we already know. We're assuming that the future of it is already known as well, and that there's no evolution beyond what we know today and we've addressed. So I think that understanding, for me, begs for the need for continued collaboration amongst nation states, amongst innovators and companies, to continue to say, how do we reduce? The risk is the cable cuts don't happen that often, as we all know. But each cut has significant implications for society. The implication for banking system, education, commerce in society. I think if it's something we need to bring to as low as possible. So we will require that continued collaboration. We'll need to find ways to continue to support the private companies who invest in this, to see it as something that the world is backing. We can't step away from it. I think that definition of how we do it is something that we must not imagine that we've solved. I think the gap is still there, and we shouldn't leave that gap unaddressed.
No, thank you very much, Mr. As you said, I think all starts with awareness, just the fact that we're now much more aware about the ecosystem and what can be done is a really big achievement, and now how we're building that. But now going for the further building on it, so it's like, Sandra, going to you. So what do you think are the main challenges, in really making this work matter, so translating from recommendations now to implementation to actually increase resilience of cables?
So again, I think the key word is coordination, because some of these challenges, and I will say the big challenges, are really institutional. So when we need to deploy and repair submarine cables, we often face these fragmented mandates across many different actors. And I think the real big challenge is how we are going to coordinate among all these actors. And I think we have been working together, actually, in finding a possible path, a possible solution for that. And I think it's possible, but it's definitely not possible in isolation as we saw it here. And we have really good examples, and there is many delays, including in urgent maintenance situations, because of that, because of this miscoordination. There are also many cases where we have repair vessels waiting for a long time for permitting. So we need to solve that. And these are really institutional challenges that we need to solve. But it's also, it makes this field so interesting, because it involves a real big number of players, number of dimensions. We are talking about environmental aspects, we are talking about legal aspects, about marine aspects, engineering challenges, telecommunications, the digital economy. So all these aspects poses as a big challenge, but makes also this very fascinating field. And I think now we need to think about how we are going to coordinate these roles and responsibilities among all these sectors. And I think the advisory body is committing significant effort in doing that and addressing this, obviously without jeopardizing any national sovereignty and that has in this role, but trying to solve the miscoordination, lack of coordination that exists. In Portugal, as I mentioned in my speech, so we conducted one of the first national level exercises in submarine cable resilience, and that brought together many actors, authorities, national authorities, different agencies, operators, from energy operators, cable, telecom, and this was actually a very important exercise, and we tried to identify exactly how we could improve coordination and across these different stakeholders, but also how we could accelerate the response in event of a failure. So it's exactly what we have to work together. And there is another challenge, I'll say, which has to do with capacity constraints that are really different among different countries. So we need to take advantage technological advancements. And I think building our networks, building more intelligence into our networks can predict these events and adapt in real time. So it's really important to take that. And I think I wanted to make to notice here that we have, as recommended by Working Group 2, for instance, maximizing the use of automatic identification systems, as an example, or vessel monitoring systems. So that's really practical recommendations that we should take advantage of. So there is all these emerging tools that can help with these capacity constraints, and they should be available to everyone. So I think Portugal is following closely these technologies, and I think the working group in the working group's advice is also points also in that direction. So I think it's also important. So institutional challenges, technological advances that should be incorporated more to help all of us.
Thank you much. And following up on that, Minister, how would you measure success? How would you know whether we are successful and overcoming those challenges and actually implementing?
I think the biggest element in that will be coordination. Can we see improvement in the way we coordinate? Can we see improvement in regional policies, but also rules and regulations that will allow for quick, resolution for cases where we have some of these courts? Can we see the cables in themselves being a lot more protected? I think it will be important. And I think for me, the biggest one truly will be, we've given so much time, effort, and resources into this work over the last 2 years. By next year, all those fantastic things that we've proposed as the working groups, will they all suddenly just happen on their own? Or what are the actions that we need to take to ensure those things then become reality? Because that wasn't the case 2 years ago, right? So in a year or 2 years' time, will they become the reality? Or do they just become recommendations which are voluntary on paper? Right? I think that's the biggest questions we need to ask ourselves, because there's a general consensus around the fact that these are the right things to do, even for the companies involved, that if we can improve on what the recommendations are saying we should improve on, that we can truly drive resilience of subsea cables. But how are we going to make them happen? I think for me, implementing the content of the working group recommendation will truly be a measure of success.
Thank you very much. Minister, indeed, we started with the discussions. No, we now have an agreement, but the proof is in the implementation. Also, I think how we actually do that. So maybe just to close us off, so just I'll give you each of you just to leave us with one sentence. What we should reflect on as we go through these 2 days. What is the key message that you think is important when we think about submarine cable resilience? So maybe Sandra with you, and then with the ministers.
So. Can I give 2 messages?
Yeah, okay, please.
Okay, one is...
As a host, given to...
Thank you. So I think policy decisions should be based on data, should be based on technical expertise, and of course, operational experience. And I think it's one big message. I think the working group recommendations point in that direction is very important, and we have to have that in mind to deliver long-lasting impact of these recommendations and see that the impact in global connectivity. My final message, of course, it's very simple. I think resilience, it's built through cooperation, through collaboration, and not in isolation. Protecting submarine cables is not a single country job. You cannot do within our national waters alone. So we must safeguard, and I'm actually going to read this sentence that I wrote, and I would like to have you all keep that. We must safeguard the entire system, because global connectivity is only as strong as it is as its weakest link. So I think this is a very, a message that I always think, and I would like all of you to have that. So we need to be strong. We need also to protect our weakest link as well. So we can only do that together.
Thank you very much. Minister.
I think for me, it's really to just say thank you to everyone that's been part of this. It's been extremely heartwarming to see how much time people have given to this and where we are today. But like Oliver Twist, I think I'll also then still say, I'll still become a pain in the butt asking for more to be done in implementing these amazing outcomes that we've seen so far. So thank you so much.
So thank you very much. That's exactly how it started, with raising ambition high. It's good to push that boundary. So again, so for everyone, so declaration is out, on the website. Recommendations are coming out as well. So I think this thanks to the great leadership of our co-chairs, thanks to a great partnership with ICPC and Kent and others here. Of course, we also had, as I mentioned, co-facilitators of working groups. We had the United Kingdom, we had China, we had North American Submarine Cable Association, we had South Africa, we have Caribbean Delegation Union, we have World Bank. Just as diversity of people who took leadership roles is really demonstrating the movement there as well. So thank you very much. Thank you, our chairs again, and have everyone a great summit. Thank you very much.